Hello everyone, my name's Alfie Terry and today I'm going to be interviewing my father, Francis Terry, about his essay Glad to Be Pastiche. So Dad, this essay is really interesting and one thing that really struck me about it is obviously I study classics and a big thing that people talk about in classics is how the sort of predecessors that make a great work of classical literature, for example. So you think about the Aeneid is very heavily inspired by its Greek predecessor, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and similarly, great speeches like Cicero's speeches, very inspired by Demosthenes of the ancient Greek world. And I think the more you kind of unpack any kind of art, the more you realise that it's really kind of a synthesization of lots of things that have come before it. And there isn't really any, or very much, original art. Everything seems to be taken from something.
Yeah. There's nothing new under the sun.
That's kind of the thing. And it's really interesting because I think a lot of the time we tend to think that, especially nowadays, we really value originality. And we talk about that quite a lot. But yeah, are we sort of focusing on the wrong thing here? Is it really about just taking what's gone before and just repurposing it for the modern age?
Yeah, I think everyone looks at something in the past and they, to a certain extent, copy it. I think even modernist architects who feel they're being avant-garde will not be unhappy if someone comes along and says, "Oh, your building looks like something by Le Corbusier, who was working 100 years ago now." I think that you need something to aim at. I think everything is copied. That's how you build. That's how children learn. I think being original for the sake of it is a bit of a. It doesn't produce very good results, is what I'm thinking. And also, it relies on you, the person knowing it, a person seeing the building or the piece of music or whatever it is, they don't care whether you were influenced by something or whether you thought it up yourself. They just want to enjoy that piece of music. And I think it's very difficult to do good art.
Yeah.
And if you have to copy or be influenced, that's fine.
So be it. Yeah, that's very true. And obviously it has a lot of relevance to your work because you're very, everything you do is taking from, classical traditions of architecture, whether that's the, Gothic or the classical style or whatever. And when you're creating a house, how much are you trying to sort of synthesize lots of different architectural traditions into something new, or how much are you just trying to make something look like, Palladio designed it or Vanbrugh designed it?
Yeah. I think really, if I'm honest, there's a different story. Palladio's buildings probably would look quite strange in the English countryside. But if, for example, an English Georgian architect like Gibbs or Vanbrugh, as you say, if my work looks like that is the highest compliment. And as you know, I've recently done this new room in Castle Howard. And actually, Mum didn't know much about it, and we went to visit. I kind of slightly hid it from her, and then we went into the room, and she didn't realise it was a new room. She was thinking, when are we going to go into Francis's room? She thought she was in the old house, it was a completely new room. All the whole thing was made last year, and for me that is the highest compliment. So I get your point that one wants to synthesize in that the client has a brief, there are the building regs, you will be affected by the modern world. And I think that if you really look at any piece of classical architecture whether it's Georgian, Edwardian, Renaissance, you see it for that fairly quickly. But I don't think you have to labour that. I think that really I spend as much time as I can. You know, if someone wants a Georgian house, I will try and make it look like a Georgian house until the last minute. Their preferences, their how someone wants to use the building will push me away from that.
Yeah.
And likewise, the building regs will push me away from that. But I hold on to that vision of it looking like a Georgian building as long as possible.
Yes, and do you think like in the future when you've kind of seen, we will kind of see like where this sort of neoclassical movement goes, do you think people will look at your house and think, oh, that's a Georgian house, or will they think, it's a neoclassical house built in, you know, the 21st century that is inspired by...
Yeah.
Like, how distinctive do you think the little modern skirmishes are?
This is where I kind of look at Edwardian classicism. And, you know, at first sight, it's a classical building. You don't really notice it. You don't really ask when it was done. And then you look further and you go, oh, this was 1910. I think that's fine. I mean, I suppose I find the forms of classical architecture very beautiful, and I think it's wonderful and exciting to be using architectural forms that it's a hand that reaches right the way through history, right the way through the Georgians, into the Baroque, into the Renaissance, right the way through to ancient Rome and ancient Greece and the Babylonians and the ancient Egyptians, and maybe even beyond that. And I think it's a great, exciting privilege to be working with that. And I mean, I suppose, you know, the pass the parcel thing, people have been pastiching classical architecture since the beginning. I mean, that's what it is. You know, the ancient Egyptians did these columns with curly tops, and then the Babylonians thought, we'll do that. People seem to like them. And they adapted them a bit, and then the Greeks conquered them and thought, maybe we'll do that. And then the Romans, and then, you know, then there was a kind of the Dark Ages, and then the Renaissance happened, and thought, we'll go back. So really, it shouldn't be called classical architecture, really. It should be called pastiche architecture. And I mean, as I point out in that essay, I find it slightly frustrating that it's seen as an insult. And I think it's something to do with the word. It's got a kind of cloying character to it. It sounds... And I think I know what people are talking about when they talk about pastiche. They say, oh, don't do a pastiche. And what they're thinking about is a kind of, you know, a building made of plastic with lots of columns on it, a sort of Las Vegas thing. But, you know, as I point out in the essay, that it comes from the opera pasticcios, which were sort of medleys of a little bit of Bach, a little bit of Pergolese, a little bit of whoever, a little bit of the
what's not to like, you know?
Exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I think you sort of said about Edwardian architecture that, you know, to begin with, you think it was sort of, oh, it's Georgian or whatever, but you zoom in close and then it starts, you think, oh, actually it is a Edwardian. And do you think that, like, it's really impossible to completely get rid of the age you're in? You know, I mean, we were talking before we started about Amy Winehouse, who in a sense is kind of a pastiche of, I'm not quite sure what you call it, but sort of Motown and soul music. And on the face of it, it looks very pastiche. It looks, you know, it sounds, she doesn't sing in a British accent. All the instruments are very authentic to that genre, but it doesn't sound like the 50s at all. You know, it sounds very 90s, and, you know, it's not quite sure what she's done. I'm not quite sure what she's done there, why it sounds so 90s, but maybe do you think there's similar things going on
I
there?
think it's a wonderful thing. And I think you're right. You hear Amy Winehouse and it's got that 90s quality. And also her personality as part of that. And I do think that is a rather magical thing when something sounds simultaneously 50s and 90s. I remember years ago, I saw a painting by an artist. I've no idea who it was. It was for a portrait award, and it was a profile of a man wearing a cap. It was a sort of, he was a slightly kind of punk era type of person, and it was just a profile, exquisitely painted. And he was wearing a cap and a simple, I think he had a shaved head and a kind of t-shirt. And it looked simultaneously, this must have been 80s, but it also looked like it could have been early Renaissance. And that's a wonderful kind of frisson. And I think that people, I don't know, it's almost seen as a sort of cop-out that it's kind of both. But I think it's a really, I mean, I also mentioned in the essay about how someone like Quentin Tarantino will, in his films, he will play with genres. So he'll know what a spaghetti western should have in it. A revenge film or whatever it is. And he uses that. And I think in a way that's kind of like a language of art, which people can tap into and enjoy.
Yeah, well, you touched on something very interesting there. I mean, I think, just going back to the classics, I do remember at the time when we were doing sort of Greek tragedy and stuff like that, they'd often say things like, I remember there was one scene where something to do with the stage sets and stuff like that would be very significant to the audience, and a bit like Quentin Tarantino, you know, all the old tragic writers would sort of play with the audience's expectations. So, you know, like I think it was something to do with coming out in a chariot usually depicted victory in an old play. And so then I think in Medea, which is an old classical play, there's one bit where Medea comes out on a chariot and she's just murdered all the children or something like that. So it's kind of playing with their idea of
So in a way you can be quite economic with what you do. Because there's a whole knowledge that the audience have. And that's the same with the Quentin Tarantino. So you don't have to go, this man with his chariot coming along, this means this. And you see that in Shakespeare, where he'll do the same thing. He'll play with kind of things that people expect from sort of classical drama, and then he'll do the opposite. And then that makes you sort of raise your. I mean, a good example of this is Caravaggio, the painter, whose Christian name was Michelangelo, which is relevant to this. He has the Calling of St. Matthew, the painting in San Luigi del Francese, and the hand of Jesus, who is there's Matthew is busy tax collecting and counting money in a kind of tavern, and Jesus comes up in the side and he points to him like this, and it's just a simple hand gesture, but the hand is exactly the same as the hand of God on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. You know, the famous hand of God. So this is kind of subtly saying this is God, and Caravaggio his stuff is loaded with that sort of thing. And you don't have to. I mean, it's an amazing painting, and you'll get the point without that. But if you're knowledgeable or just culturally aware of that time, you get an extra level of interest and excitement. I mean, even another very good example from Caravaggio is probably my favourite painting, The Supper at Emmaus. And as I'm sure you know, the scene is where Jesus is after Jesus has died, and everyone thinks, where is he? Blah blah blah, and then he walks with a couple of the disciples, and then they have a meal, and he breaks the bread, and then suddenly they recognise him. And it's this amazing dramatic moment. And Caravaggio paints Jesus with no beard, so that he doesn't look like Jesus. And it's quite interesting that there is a kind of, in painting, there Jesus looks a particular way, so you don't have to kind of have an arrow saying
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is Jesus.
Yeah.
But what he was doing there, and I think this is what you're talking about, is you can subvert these things, and it is such a clever painting because when you see it, you're looking at it, you think, oh, three men in a bar, three men in a tavern having a meal. What are they doing? And then you kind of look at it, and then you, like the disciples, think, ah, it's Jesus.
Yeah.
But it takes you a while because he hasn't got a beard.
It's so clever.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I'll have to see that.
No, it's an amazing painting. But I think that, yeah, I mean, everything we do is there's a huge amount of knowledge behind everything. We're always building on something previous.
Yeah.
We're not living in a vacuum, and frankly, why would you want to?
Why would
live?
you want to? Yeah. I mean, that's the interesting thing. I mean, with your work, let's say you take inspiration from a certain building. How much of the enjoyment of that building to people seeing it, how much of that is, oh, I see what he's done here, he's taken this
It's got to
column.
work without that.
Okay, yeah.
It's got to completely work without that.
Yeah.
And actually, I almost try and hide my references. I don't hide them,
Okay.
but I just feel. I mean, for example, if there's a nice whatever it is, a nice keystone, a nice capital I've seen on my travels, and I think, I'll put that in, or a nice whatever it could be, overmantle or whatever it is, and I think, I might adapt it a bit. I might not adapt it at all. But what I'm after is something beautiful that looks good, and no, they don't have to. In some respects, especially if they don't.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that.
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting because the Caravaggio thing, it works better if you do know the references. I mean, in a way, I guess there's two levels of enjoying things. I mean, you can enjoy that Caravaggio Supper at Emmaus as an amazing, beautiful painting.
Yeah.
But you can also enjoy it. In fact, you wouldn't even have to know the Christian story to enjoy it. You can just say, beautifully painted 3-4 men or whatever it is in a bar, in a tavern having supper, good painting. But I think you do get on that next level if you have an appreciation of the Christian story, and then on top of that the knowledge of previous paintings. But I suppose in answer to your question, I suppose that I just want it to look authentic and right. Yeah. And I suppose I'm playing with people's knowledge of Georgian architecture, which they've seen, particularly in this country, and it's been bouncing around in their head. They look up. I've often had clients will say, "Oh, that doesn't look quite right," and it's because there's a capital that's wrong, or in fact, one of the things I do in my office is whenever we do anything which we think's new, we always ask, what's the precedent? Has this been done before? And if it hasn't been done before, there's usually a good reason. It either doesn't look good or it's a bad idea. And it sounds awfully defeatist, and I think the way artists and architects are brought up, maybe less so, well, certainly architects less so now, but certainly artists is, that you must be original, you must do something that's never been done. But that doesn't interest me. I want to do stuff that's beautiful and good. And I do feel the history of art is the history of what's seminal, or the history of what's new. Rather, it would be completely different. Someone should do it. A history of good art, rather than seminal. Because we've taken on the scientific model of a progress. That something's new, and then had this, and then had that. But to be honest, with the history of art, in painting, I kind of go in different directions in the post-impressionist era. Like I'm all fine. The whole history of art up to Manet, Monet, and Renoir, and Degas. That's great. The minute it gets to Van Gogh and Gauguin and Cézanne, that's not for me.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm looking at John Singer Sargent, and a whole load of amazing Edwardian painters who came in that era.
Yeah.
And then the tree went off in a direction that I'm really not interested in. And obviously, there's a few modern artists I like.
Yeah, well, I guess it's easier to. Well, I think we've got that mug at home somewhere that has all the different paintings from all the different.
All the different eras.
I guess it's kind of easier to just have something really bold like Van Gogh rather than John Singer Sargent's, who it doesn't look as different.
Well,
as
he wasn't doing anything new.
No.
I think he was just incredibly good. He was basically doing what Velasquez did and putting it. I mean, actually, similar in a way to Amy Winehouse, he was doing. Doing Baroque painting, but for the Edwardian era. And there's something of Tiepolo in him. There's something of Velasquez, Caravaggio, and again.
But even then, like, it does look very Edwardian.
It's
got that atmosphere
of it. They define what Edwardian is. Yes,
almost more than Van Gogh. Although I'm not sure, he was kind of a similar.
Well, he was early. I mean, it's Victorian. He's kind of. 1880s really.
Yeah.
He doesn't do anything for me. I shouldn't. I think.
Yeah. But he does have a kind of style that's very distinctive.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what people.
I think so. I mean, that's interesting in this kind of Instagram age.
Yeah.
I suppose an artist is a thing. But it is Van Gogh. If you want that particular brushstroke, if you want that particular palette, he's your man, and he made a style.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what people want really, is just go, oh, this is Van Gogh, I think that's kind of maybe it's more of a shallow way to think about art.
I mean, I suppose in a world without pastiche, that would be the answer, that every painter is a blind alley. But, modern painters aren't blind alleys. I mean, as I mentioned in that essay, Picasso, for example, he was looking at Cézanne and he was looking at African masks and putting those together and making a new style as a consequence. And I think I don't know what Van Gogh was looking at exactly, but I'm sure he
probably was something there. Yeah.
Or maybe he should have done. That's where I was getting wrong.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. So going back to sort of modern architecture, I mean, you touched on this earlier, but how much do you think modernists are taking older examples of modernist buildings, or maybe even earlier, as sort of inspiration, or how much are modernists just really trying to be original? Because I feel like I see a modernist building and it sort of does look original in a sense that maybe a more classical one isn't. But
I mean, I don't know if I agree with that. I think that there was I think it was Mies van der Rohe did a house that was basically a shoebox done in glass with steel sort of beams. That he did that, I don't know when he did it, probably in the 1950s or maybe earlier. And that was a kind of seminal house. Honestly, there are award-winning buildings which are complete pastiches of that, done like last year.
That's really interesting.
And it's kind of seen as daring and cutting edge. It's a little unfair in a way.
That's a really good point.
So I think they have their heroes, and I don't think it's any different. But I think in a way that the classical architect wants to be pastiche. He wants to have these references and play with these references, and I feel that society probably isn't. and it's really. I mean, I was just saying that, you know, society is probably not educated enough that if you were playing some game, for example, you had some reference to, I don't know, you're doing a church and there's a reference to some particular church in Rome and you're trying to make some theological point. You know, no one's going to get that now. To be honest, I don't know how many people ever got that sort of stuff. But strangely enough, in this Instagram world where everything is recognized and you might be able to do it now.
I think, you got a good point actually. Yeah, I mean, maybe you'd have a very different palette of things to what you would have had in back in the day. But yeah. No, that's a really good point. So you do think that the modernists have, they are kind of heavily influenced by things, even though kind of outwardly it's more about being original. Being original is kind of more welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a modernist architect would say originality is their thing. I think they would want to be doing something good.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, again, the term modernism, you know, I'm a modern architect. It's, I mean, anything done now is modern. You know, and I also think modernism evolved. I think that if modernism of 100 years ago was very kind of strident and confident, and we're going to smash down Paris and just put a bunch of towers down and smash down every city that's got any historical past, you know. But I think now it doesn't have quite that confidence. Mind you, having said that, you know, they're building hideous towers all over London, the centre of London, and I don't know why they're doing it. They're blocking everyone's views. They're temporary buildings. They must be sustainably terrible. I was going to say, just putting that on one side, another aspect of modernism is it's kind of quite sort of scared in a way. It kind of doesn't want to do a great deal. And there is a lot of convergence. I mean, I think these camps, are kind of modernist classicists, are becoming more fragmented. For example, a modernist architect would struggle with Poundbury, for example, because of all the classical architecture and the very overt classical architecture that's there. Way too much fun, really. But the same architects would really appreciate the fact that it's done with walkable neighbourhoods, that all this, you know, that their care in using sustainable materials, using local materials where you can. So, you know, it is, I think, with all these things, the minute you make a definition that the modernists do this and the classicists do that, it's fragmented. But it isn't completely not true.
That's interesting. I mean, it's interesting to compare that to the painting world as well. That's kind of, I mean, you're right, it's a lot more complicated than we like to think. I suppose going back to our sort of comparison with Amy Winehouse, for example, I think that you can slightly distinguish between what she's doing, which is kind of more pastiche, because you can compare someone like UB40, who we were talking about earlier, where it's like they're taking reggae, but they're really making it their own. They're not, you know, they kind of sing in an English accent, and you'd be less likely to hear UB40 and think, oh, that's, you know, reggae, and much more kind of, oh, it's its own thing, you know. Or The Police maybe is a better example. So when you're designing a building, what are you trying to be more like UB40 or The Police, for example, or are you trying to be more like Amy Winehouse? And if it happens to look of your time, then that's kind of welcome, you know, side effects, but it's not the intention.
No, I mean, I think, as I say, I would like my buildings to look Georgian. You know, and I think I don't mind the fact that someone will look at them and realise they're modern. I don't mind that at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that I've tried to do them as much taste and judgment as I can. But on the other hand, you know, I think there's lots of advantage to a modern classical house.
Absolutely,
in
yeah.
that it's it's better insulated, and you know, if you get a house made, you know where all the wires are. It's got all the up-to-date plumbing. It doesn't have to be retrofitted. You can have a big kitchen. You know, there are
Yeah.
so many advantages. So I used to kind of struggle more with modern classical buildings, but actually, I think if they're done well, I think they can be a real pleasure.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, I think that's a good point to wrap up. If you've enjoyed watching this and you're interested about the essay we talked about, it's available on the website and you can also buy the book. And we'll be doing a few more of these, so watch out for them as well. And thanks very much.